Coming up, we got the most brutal installment in the Evil Dead franchise. Join us as we dissect Evil Dead Burn. Stay tuned.
To your perfect family. Cheers.
Welcome to The Morgue, where we dissect the latest and greatest in the world of entertainment. We are your hosts, Arturo Padilla, along with Mr. Nick Valdez. Tex, how you doing today, buddy? What's up?
Howdy, everybody. Howdy, Arturo. Evil Dead Burn. This thing is gnarly, buddy. This is gnarly. It's nasty. And with the movie called Evil Dead Burn, you kind of hope you're getting Evil Dead and some burning, right? Like, because Evil Dead Rise came out not that long ago, and it was missing some of the teeth. Like, it was missing some of that evil, right? It had some of it. It just, I think you and I agree, Arturo. We'll get into this here later in the conversation that we were both kind of not entirely disappointed, but a little bit, like enough to be like, oh, this is no 2013 Evil Dead, which was the last installment we got, which was when you look back on it, it's super brutal, all that stuff. This is all to say Evil Dead Burn, finally a return, right? This finally feels like a full comeback. This thing is evil, buddy. This is, ooh, there's a lot going on. But how you feeling, Arturo? What you thinking about Evil Dead Burn?
Yeah, dude, I absolutely agree. I totally enjoyed this movie. It does have its hiccups along the way, but in terms of a horror fan like myself, I got everything I wanted from this movie. And I was very curious to see how it would all go down, because if you guys go back to their archive, we were talking about how they were already touting Evil Dead Wrath in 2028 as being like the craziest one of them. And I'm like, wait a minute, we haven't even seen a single second of Evil Dead Burn yet, but you're over here talking about Evil Dead Wrath. And then we got the teaser for Burn, and it looked good. It looked very chaotic. And honestly, like, that teaser was a perfect setup for what we got here. This movie is total chaos, total brutality. It was Evil Dead through and through, one of the meanest, most evilest Evil Deads there is in this franchise. And I really liked the way that everything was kind of set up in this universe, because, Tex, we have a trilogy now, right?
Yeah.
This movie continues the story that they started in Evil Dead Rise. If you guys go check out my review on Scary World, I was just talking about how Evil Dead Rise had some moments that weren't part of the core story. And I was wondering where that was. And that was specifically in the beginning, where the movie starts out in a cabin with some people we don't even know, and we never even follow the entire rest of the movie. But now, Tex, we see where Lee Cronin was taking that, and we have Evil Dead Burn, Tex.
Yeah, this is a widening of the franchise. I think, you can argue that the Evil Dead movies have a story, but do they really? Right? Because when you look back on it all and you see what Ash has become through the years, and Bruce Campbell, shout out to Bruce, still the icon after all these years, forever groovy. But like, you look at Ash's journey through these movies. Evil Dead 1 and 2 are essentially, like, the second one's essentially a reboot and kind of like the same idea and story, but not really, and the canon's weird. But then, like, you get shows like Ash versus the Evil Dead, and you get movies like Army of Darkness, and you're like, oh, okay, he's more like a pulp horror character who's just gonna go through wacky adventures and taking on deadites and just beating up bad guys kind of style. And so, but with then Evil Dead 2013, it was a full reboot. Like, this is essentially like, okay, let's take that original story and take it seriously a little bit more, a little bit more than even Sam Raimi did all those decades ago. And now with Evil Dead Rise and Evil Dead Burn and presumably Evil Dead Wrath coming in 2028, like Arturo was saying, this is a connected trilogy. Spoilers, but also not full spoilers. Just in case you want to go check this out, there are post-credit scenes, and they do tie to the wider franchise. This is all I will say about that. I will not say what these things are. I will not say what the connections might be in this movie. That's for you to further dig through. But what this is telling us, like Arturo is saying, is telling us that, oh, they have a franchise plan in mind for the first time in a while. So this is why now it's making sense that they're doing these 3 Evil Dead movies back to back to back with different directors. And I'm curious. I think, like, this isn't a stranger situation, right, Arturo?
Yo, oh my God. I am so glad it's not a stranger's situation. But it does seem like these filmmakers were in contact or in communication along the way during the production of all these movies. Because Lee Cronin, as I mentioned earlier, does set up what we see here in Evil Dead Burn. And
Yes.
as we spoken, if you guys go back to our archives, we did talk about Evil Dead Rise, and we did talk about how it never truly went far enough for our likings
Yes.
for an Evil Dead movie, too. It got you to the setup, right? But it never really got the payoff right, especially because it's a rated R movie and we're like, what's going on here? Why didn't we just
Yeah.
continue going further? So I think
Yeah.
they had in mind the future and what was coming. And Evil Dead Burn makes up for all that stuff that we missed in
Oh,
Evil Dead Rise.
man, that puts it in so much more context, Arturo, because when you look at it, right, Evil Dead Rise is the amuse bouche. It's like let's
Yes.
reintroduce Evil Dead to you all. And now
Yes.
Evil Dead Bird's like, okay, here is the meat.
Yeah, exactly. Because Rise came out in 2023, which was 10 years after the 2013, like, almost perfect movie that was, Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead, which is like, oh, still,
A
that movie
classic.
still
Yeah.
stands the test of time. Absolute classic. I don't care what anybody says. That movie is the best of the franchise.
10
And
out of 10.
10 out of 10 for sure. And then we go 10 years after and we get Rise, and we never really got to the point where we got in 2013, right? And then
Yeah.
we are here now in 23 years later in 2026, and we have Burn finally. And now we're seeing that, hey, this is all part of a bigger picture. And like Tex mentioned, there are some post-credit scenes that serve to build up what's coming in 2028. We don't know what that exactly is yet, but hopefully it won't disappoint, right? But back to Burn. Sebastian Vanacek, the director of 2023's Infested, the movie, the French movie about the spider infestation in this like a tenement
Oh,
building, like was the one
really?
who was personally called up by Sam Raimi to direct this thing. Yes, Infested was
Yeah, I
awesome.
remember, like, digging deep into your, like, just the more or Corpse Feed archives. I remember you calling that one out as like a big movie, right?
Yeah, and Infested was awesome. It's this really dope movie where this tenement building it gets locked down and it's just huge spider infestation. Really impressive. And that was his feature film debut too, which was like, wow. So Sam Raimi saw that and gave this dude a call, right? Just like with Fede Alvarez, Sam Raimi saw his short film Panic Attack on YouTube and gave him a call to it and told him, hey, I want you to direct the next one in the franchise. Same thing happened here with Vanacek. And he did not disappoint, man. He brings that French visceral filming style to the party here in Evil Dead Burn, and he does a great job of making sure the action sequences and the shots and the look of this movie are just on point, man. He did great action sequences and invested. And here, I think that's one of the highlights of this movie, Tex. The action in this movie and the way it's filmed is
Yeah.
absolutely awesome. You get a bunch of different camera angles, camera techniques being used all throughout this house, which by the way, we're in a huge house now. We're not in a cabin
Yeah.
anymore. We're not
Not in a
ever
cabin,
since
not in that
yep,
tiny apartment that was
not a
in
tiny
Rise.
apartment. Yeah, because Rise took us out of the woods, right? And into the urban
Mhm.
landscape. And here in Burn, we're kind of in this isolated vacation home that's absolutely huge and humongous. And Vanacek takes advantage of the whole setting to make sure everything is used as a death trap. And I think bringing in Vanacek and having some fresh eyes and a fresh take on this franchise is the move. And I think that's what Raimi is really in tune with, bringing in fresh horror directors with a different viewpoint, a different take on things, a different way to produce things to freshen up and liven up this franchise, Tex.
Yeah, you're so right, because just as you mentioned that this trilogy is now building towards something, a bigger story. It's also building in terms of just aggression, and just with the directorial stuff alone, like, even not even getting the technical stuff, there are lots of cool, like, camera movements, and it feels very Raimi. There's a lot of those moments of like quick camera close-ups and zooms and like cutaways, and like there's a cool shot with a mirror that they do. It's kind of reminiscent of that one Saw back then, where it's like in Saw where a guy falls through glass and then like it transitions to the next scene. It's something like in that sense, where it's like she gets pushed into like a glass in the hallway, but then like the perspective shifts around, and it's the
Oh,
coolest thing to
that was
see.
so awesome.
It That's such like
Yes.
a fight movie kind of like, it's
Yes.
something I would have expected to see in like The Furious in terms of camera techniques. And this is all to say, like, even if you don't know like the full technicals, which I don't, like, I will say that straight out, but like it drives up that emotion and that aggression and that rage and that intensity, and it's you can feel it building, and like it adds that cool, that's that additional layer of Evil Dead we're talking about here. This is that additional layer of evil, and when you there's a lot of evil stuff in this. There's a lot of like, that's the thing too. Like this, that's the one thing about Evil Dead movies, right? It's like a kind of, they do rely on how much you enjoy blood and gore and viscera, and you know, there's a lot. There are some scenes that go really for it, but like there are some that feel like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm a little desensitized to some of these things because, like, because rewatching Evil Dead 2013, like I was squeamish, and it still makes you squeamish. And in
Yeah,
here,
100%.
when it happens, I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, this is cool rather than I'm being squeamish. I don't know. I don't know how to dig into that further, Arturo. But what did you think of like the gore?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tex. There are moments here that, depending on who you are, you'll be squirming or you won't. You know what I mean? Like in my review in Scary World, I mentioned that the uninitiated as well as the initiated will be squirming in their seats because I
Right.
was one who was just falling in love with all these brutal moments. I was squirming when I had to squirm. There was a lot of moments that were just very gnarly, very like, oh man. And I was totally in it, man. I was totally in it, Tex. And like one quick production note before we move on from the production of stuff. Did you know that Banachek actually used real fire for everything that involved any
Okay.
like fire scenes,
That's
which is
cool.
crazy.
That's cool
It's
because
crazy.
there's a lot of fire. Yeah, so,
Yeah.
like,
And
that's cool.
his reasoning text was that you can't replicate the intricacies and the imperfections of fire with CG because it'll look too fake. So
And,
we do get a lot of fire, but there is Tex some CG here that even
yeah,
I was very kind of like, what are we doing here, guys?
yeah, yeah, it's tough, right? Because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but not really. It's just like one of the Deadites uses a lot of CG, and it does kind of take you out of the. It's a little tough in that climactic part, right? Where you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, because you're like,
Yeah. Yeah,
it,
we can say straight up, it
compared
was the
to,
final boss that had
yeah,
CG used on it. But
yes,
like that CG, um, some people are doing callbacks to I'm not gonna name it, they're doing callbacks to a James Cameron film. But I think with that said, there was enough going on around this final boss that I was like, okay, I'll give you a pass for this because everything else was
yes,
just so awesome that, like,
yes,
you know, we'll have a conversation after this is finished.
yeah. It's like, when it does use CG, it's to enhance like a physical effect. Like there's one Deadite who shoots out like half of his face. And so when they need to like have that face move and like a creepily, eerily more like to just add up to the ooky spookiness of it, there is a little bit of CG in that use. But that's the, like, it's the gravy on top to just add
Yeah.
that little pop to it. So I think that's also why that CG monster at the end kind of like does, can really throw you off because there's so
Yeah.
much cool stuff that's done practically beforehand. There's so many wicked things that happen practically that you're like, oh, so when that's what makes the CG stand out even
But
more,
listen,
right? And
don't get it twisted. This is not a case of the Thing remake where
oh
it
yeah,
was all
no, no,
CG all the time and it was just completely like vomit inducing. This was just a
yeah,
moment where they were like, what's the best way to really do this without looking
yeah,
goofy? Because honestly, if you guys go to my Scary World page, I've reviewed almost every Evil Dead movie. And in Evil Dead 2, for instance, not my favorite one. They use a lot of practical effects and some stop motion animation there. Like there's this one scene in particular where there's a skeleton, which was Ash's ex-girlfriend, right? She rises from the dead and she's doing a dance, right? And it looks
mhm.
just very like comical. And this is what they wanted to avoid here. To have it look too comical. So I think they went the CG route in order to just kind of help it blend into the rest of the setting, which I think works, but it's still, as Tex mentioned, it's still a little off putting coming from about like an hour or so of just practical effects to this
Yeah,
point.
yeah, the reason we're digging so much in the technicals and the practical effects and like whether or not it looks good is unfortunately the other side of this coin here with Evil Dead Burn. It is going to be the make or break of it
Yeah.
because the other side of it is the story and characters. Like, is this even like a movie narrative that you want to kind of work through, even with the gore and the theme park ride of what you're getting with the horror? And not really. Like it's a tough story, man. Like so you've got Alice played by Suhaila Yakub, and you know she's like I think this is her first like I've never seen her anything. I don't know if
Yo,
she's
she was
done like
Chani's best friend in Dune 1 and 2.
awesome. So
Yep.
shout outs to her. You know, because she is the one shining light in this, and I think you know that's a positive and a negative, right? Because like of
Yeah.
course, right? If she you need your heroine to be like the standout person in this, but also when your heroine is the only person who stands out, this is the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Tex on this. I was trying my best to really push that back because
Yeah,
the characters, like from the very jump of the first act, man, they're just so unlikable that in your head you're like, what's going on with these characters here? Are they already
yeah,
possessed? You know what I mean? Because they're just
yeah,
so mean spirited and just not very amicable, you know? So
yeah,
the main gist of it is that Alice, she's a widow, you know, her husband just died in a car wreck and she's invited to the funeral by her family who apparently doesn't like her at all. But we don't know why. We don't see or get any semblance of why they have so much animosity towards her, which is kind of weird because the way they treat her, you would want some kind of backstory there, you know?
yeah, I think like it's loosely that like they blame her for his death or something, but then it also 100% does not make sense. And what at the end of the day, like they're being so they're aggressive and they're mean and they're terrible to her through their debut, and it's like where's the contrast to when they become deadites, right? And I think
Great point.
that's the failure of this. It's like that's when you break it down, the Deadite transformation is supposed to hit because you're like, oh, they are acting in a dramatically different fashion than they were before. But when you have characters who it's more of a lateral move than a vertical one, you're like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes, it's a lateral
okay,
promotion for sure, right? It's like at a job.
yes,
It's
you're
like, yeah,
like,
like we'll just give you a pay raise, but you have the same title. You're still an asshole. You know what I mean?
yes, that's exactly it. Like, you know, for example, you know, the dad is like the first one to go full Deadite, and he was already like a dick, like
Yeah.
immediately. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, let's just they're cutting like they're just cutting to it, I guess. Like
Yeah.
who even cares? But it it just kind of piles on. And unfortunately, that's not enough to for me. At the end of the day, I don't know if it's enough to like hinge the theme park ride on top of it, right? Because it's like if you're there for that gore and that viscera, which you probably will be. This is Evil Dead Burn. I'm also going to say that, but it's also something that I have to note where it's like, you know, if you're someone like me who can give her like live without all the gore, but I'm still here for it. If it's a good story, it does wane in that
Yeah.
factor.
No, I do have to agree with that. And that's why it did lose a point in my Scary World review, too, because I just couldn't get over the fact how off putting the entire collective was. And there are no real standout performances here like we get in Evil Dead Rise or in Evil Dead 2013 or even with Bruce Campbell back in the day. Everyone just kind
Right.
of does their job here. And Suhaila Yakub, who plays Alice, she does earn her final girl status because she goes through absolute hell just to get there, you know? But everyone is just there because they have a mission. They want to just make a really gnarly movie. And that's what they did. I do wish they would have padded the characters a little bit. This is Tex the longest of the franchise in terms of runtime. So they did have some time
Huh.
to kind of add a little bit more to these characters, but I guess they didn't write it that way. You know, it like there was no goodwill at all in these characters. Even the kid who gets kind of picked on by the family turns out to be a huge jerk, you know, leaving his girl in the car with his dead-eyed dad. That's a really
Yeah.
everyone in the theater was just like flabbergasted, like, dude,
It's
you're just like you just left your girlfriend to die.
yeah, and that's what sucks, right? Because that's also just like that's a cool horror sequence, right? Like you're like, yo, this is a terrible character making a terrible decision, and it's cool for horror, right? You're like, yeah, this is a great horror movie move. But when you look at it on the with the non-horror lenses, you're like, oh, it's a terrible character making a terrible decision. Why should I care about any of it? And
Yeah,
I, I, if
I
that feels
understand.
yes, like
I
it feels
understand it, Tex.
unfair. It
Yeah.
feels unfair to say it, but it's like you do have to like think outside of the horror
But you're
box a
right though,
little bit.
Tex. I mean, you're right. Like it is unfair, especially when it comes to character work. Because here at the morgue, we dissect everything. You know, we're not
Yeah,
just here for the blood and gore and stuff. If you want to do that, go check out Scary World. I still break things down there, but I do care more about the horror stuff here. I mean, over there, I should say. In the morgue, we like to go a little bit deeper than that as to why things happen and why are things the way they are. And honestly, it's not fair to the story because you side automatically with Alice. Like there
yeah,
is no kind of swaying you here. It's automatically, oh, these people are just so unlikable. I'm just gonna root for Alice the entire time, which is kind of by default, unfortunately. But me and Tex were talking off air before we even started this show to get our conversation straight. And we were talking about the 2013 version where you have a group of friends who meet up for a goal to help Mia, you know, get clean, right? And they're not the most likable people, but they're human. You know what I mean? Like they actually represent humanity in real life. You know what I mean? They care about each other and they care about Mia enough to get together to make sure that she can pass through this, you know, through these demons inside of her, you know, literally and
yeah.
figuratively speaking. But you know, but here in 2026 with the burn, we don't get any of that. Even in Rise, actually, you know, we
Yeah.
spend a little time with the kids, with the mom, with her sister. We get familiar with their personalities, and we're like, okay, cool. These are real people just going through it right now. It's completely opposite in 2026. And it is unfortunately a make or break for people who will get completely just put off by the fact that there are no likable characters here. There is no one to really root for until
Yeah.
because even Alice has her little quirks where you're like, the family is grieving. Maybe you can show up to the funeral, dress for a funeral. You know what I mean? Not in like in sweats or everything, but everyone grieves
Well,
differently. So I don't want to get into that.
yeah, it's tough too because there's a whole like there's an additional layer to her side of things
Yes.
where they they
Yes.
they tie in some real world violence into this, and it's tough because that does add and that adds a complicated layer that the movie does
Yes.
not explore enough of. That's the other thing where
But
it's like,
like it's funny
okay,
because like you're absolutely right on that, but it adds the layer only to Alice and her perspective, like and the
yes,
audience perspective of
100%,
Alice.
yes,
So
yes,
this is why we're so inclined to just like root for Alice because we as the audience we're omniscient, so we see the flashbacks that she's going through, the fights with her ex husband, you know, the abuse that she went through. The family clearly didn't see that. But then like it's brought up and around the second, third act where she's like, hey, you knew he was like this. Your family
Yeah,
is like this. But it's like, it's not really earned though, Tex, right?
yeah, 100% agree. And the thing is, when you introduce stuff like that to the story, it's meant for to use the Deadite to then use it to their advantage, right? Like this is when you hear the Deadites talk and talk their trash and say what they're going to say, like, "Oh, you've been hiding your real feelings about this, blah 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 blah," and
Mm-hmm.
that is how these movies usually work through those stories. And
Yes.
this one does not have that. Like, with Alice and the mother character, she's or the mother-in-law basically. She's mean to her through the whole thing and always passive aggressive and never really feels like she's even trying to be good to her in any way. It just once again, it's all lateral moves for these people and you're just like, okay. And that unfortunately, when you think about it going even further deeper, you're like, yo, that's the fun of the Deadites, right? You're like,
Yes.
the fun of these monsters
Yes.
in particular is that they're cruel and they do this stuff on, like, they're evil. This is they're not just ghosts that possess. They're not just gonna turn people's heads around and vomit and do whatever. Like, no, they're there to like inflict as much mental and physical torture on
Yep.
a soul as much as possible. And
Yep.
so when you have moves like this, Evil Dead Burn, you're like, okay, it never goes under skin deep in some ways. That's when you look back at the 10 out of 10 Evil Dead 2013. That's what that movie does. It's like
Yeah.
it's going deep. It's going deep. And here it's like, yeah, it does cool stuff, but does it go deeper? And
Yeah.
even if it doesn't go as deep as you want, does the horror balance it out? Oh, I mean, for a lot of people, yes.
Yeah,
And
I definitely get that take, Tex. But one thing that did get me through that portion of the story was seeing how the connective tissue was being built here
right,
in the Evil Dead universe. This movie in particular, it doesn't start off the way most Evil Dead movies start, which is somebody finding the book of the dead and reading from it or playing a record or something. This starts out with this kid just doing research on with his grandfather's stuff in the attic, and he
right.
finds this Kandarian dagger, which apparently the Deadites really want because this is what really kind of is a weapon against them, you can say. It's like their kryptonite. So the way in to get the Deadites to come to this world and start their shenanigans is through this research that's being done by this kid because he wants to write a book, right? So I kind of put the characters to the background in order to
Yeah.
appreciate the story and the angle that they were able to get
The
into this Evil Dead franchise.
the franchise move, right? It's what we were
Yes.
alluding to in the beginning of this conversation, where it's like this is it really is going to depend how much you're interested in Evil Dead story franchise world kind of thing, rather than the story of each particular Evil Dead. It's more now they're going to be, oh, how interested are you in the lore? And it's an interesting move for the Evil Dead movies to make, to be 100% honest, if they want to keep them relevant, right? It's like you can't just keep doing these jungle gym rides forever. You
Yeah.
can't you can't keep doing park rides and haunted house things forever. You gotta start planning. And this is
Yeah.
the natural change in theaters now, where it's like it's franchise potential for everything now. So there you go. What does Evil Dead Burn say about its franchise potential? And with that question lingering and that being said, Arturo, here's how we do things at the morgue, everybody. We have our scale of pay for it, which is go check it out as soon as you can. You're not going to want to miss it. There's wait for it, which is, oh, you can wait to watch it to when it's more convenient. Either you can wait a week, watch it at home on streaming, whatever. Then there's stay away from it, which is the self-explanatory one of just don't watch it at all. You're not missing anything. So on Evil Dead Burn, I'll start us off here on a scale of pay for it, wait for it, stay away from it. I will say wait for it. I'm going to say wait for it ultimately because, it's got cool stuff in it. But like I've been saying this whole time, to me, it's the overall story elements of the characters themselves, the experience as a film. I also do appreciate the horror franchise potential and everything it does and what it widens the whole thing. But in terms of what I saw with Evil Dead Burn and that experience alone, it's a wait for it. And Arturo, how are you feeling about Evil Dead Burn? Pay for it, wait for it, or stay away from it?
I am on the opposite end. I say pay for it because of the cool things in this movie. Characters aside, I really enjoyed the brutality, the gore, the Evil Dead stuff of it all. Yes, the characters were definitely an obstacle to get over, but I got over it because of the production of this movie, the way things were done, the camera shots, the the different techniques that Vanacek was able to employ here in this movie. Again, the blood, the gore, the brutality, it was all visceral. It was all very impactful and really made a difference in the way I saw this movie. After seeing the past four Evil Dead movies, Rise, Evil Dead 2013, Evil Dead 2, and The Evil Dead, this one is absolutely the most brutal one in the franchise. There was just a lot of good being done on the horror side of things here. I do wish, though, man, I do wish, Tex, that they had at least given the characters a little bit of room to play with in order for us to feel that change. Like you mentioned, it's so important in these Evil Dead movies to really recognize when a character just snaps into it. It's like an obsession. When Nikki goes into horror, Nikki, it's the snap of the willow tree, right?
Yeah.
And we don't get that here. The characters are just so bad and off-putting that you don't know when they're possessed or not. But I do like the way everything went down. I like the connective tissue that they're building. I like the way they got into the actual Deadite lore itself. And that's why for me it's a pay for it. It's been a long time since we've seen such a brutal Evil Dead that this one for sure will definitely be intriguing to the fans of the franchise, right? Because of everything involved. And the reviews are all saying the same thing, that it is violent, it is gory and stuff, but those characters, man, everyone's still nitpicking with those characters. So that could be a big make or break for a lot of people. But if you put that aside, which is at times a little difficult, there is a lot of good stuff here in this movie. Buddies at home, let us know in the comments down below what you thought of Evil Dead Burn, what your favorite moment was. Tell us what you think about these characters. Are you falling in line with us here that the characters were definitely bottom of the barrel kind of stuff? Let us know in the comments what your favorite Evil Dead moment is throughout the entire franchise. We have a trilogy here, folks, and that means we'll be talking more about Evil Dead down the line with Evil Dead Wrath coming out in 2028. So please stay tuned for that. Go check out my stuff on Scary World and go check out a Texas review on Valdezology 101. He has a very honest take about things and he views it with the overall movie at stake here, not just the horror stuff. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. This is The Morgue, where we dissect the latest and greatest in the world of entertainment. We are your hosts, Arturo Padilla, along with Mr. Nick Valdez. A big shout out goes to you guys out there for listening and for watching. We have all these episodes up on our archive and anywhere you get your podcast streams. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Hit that bell up there. That way you know when all these videos are dropping. Leave us a comment, leave us a review on our podcast, leave us some stars. We'd highly appreciate it. Big shout out goes to Del Virus for all the artwork you've seen in front of you throughout the years. And last but not least, it is a scary world out there, especially with the Deadites back in the fold, but we are here to walk you through it.